Last time on Sakamoto Days. After Lu gets kidnapped by a bunch of guys in space suits, Shin and Sakamoto go on a mission to save her. The suits remind Shin of the lab he grew up in, but it had now been taken over by villainous evil men. After breaking into the lab, Sakamoto and Shin fight off against the deranged Horiguchi, while Lu is locked up in the dungeon. Before the episode ends, Asaragi and Shishiba also arrive at the lab on some official order business. Will Sakamoto and Shin save Lu and the lab? And what could the order want here? Find out in episode 8. Episode 8 kicks off with Mishimo actually coming to the Sakamotos with the intention of buying something instead of just freeloading, thanks to the 500 yen coin he found on the road. But at the shop is only little Hannah, who is crying to herself over not being able to tell everyone about her day at the Bring Your Parent to School day since everyone just suddenly left. Seeing the little girl in distress makes Mishimo want to cheer her up with some acorns or candy. However, that doesn't work. Having more brains than his master, Pisuk pulls on Mishimo's ear, suggesting they find her family instead, after which he flies off to do just that. In the dungeon of the lab, Lu meets Asakura, the former director of the lab, and immediately starts strangling him for getting her locked up until he makes her realize why he would do that and lock himself up as well. Meanwhile, Horiguchi also manages to stick a needle in the back of Sakamoto's neck, blaming his slowed down responses due to his weight gain for it. Sakamoto tries to punch him, but ends up socking Shin instead. Horiguchi reveals his needle worked in such a way that it confused his brain to differentiate between friend and enemy. Sakamoto tries again, but lands a solid punch on Horiguchi this time round, revealing he thought about hitting Shin this time. Back in the dungeon, Lu starts taking her frustration out on the enemy guy locked up with them who was responsible for her kidnapping, as he mistook her for Shin. As Lu shakes the life out of him, Asakura overhears Shin's name and immediately asks if she meant the same psychic Shin he knew. Lu asks him how he knew about Shin, and Asakura begins telling her their backstory. A long time ago, he used to conduct research on supernatural abilities at the lab, and Shin was just a little boy who his friend Ando had one day dropped at their lab and disappeared after. Asakura told Shin he was working on supernatural powers in human beings, which would end up making everyone very happy someday. The two seemed to be at each other's throats, but in reality, they shared a very special father-son kind of bond with each other. His dream really resonated with Shin's innocent, childish mind, as whenever others would doubt Asakura's research, Shin would be right there to back him up. One day, Asakura's research had finally paid off as he was able to create a formula that could potentially unlock superpowers in humans. Unfortunately, Shin was very thirsty that night, and seeing a giant flash in front of him with colorful liquid was just too enticing. Before Asakura could have done anything, Shin had already chugged the whole thing. Asakura then continued to examine Shin for a bit, but wasn't able to see any changes, meaning his research was a flop. But he was at least glad Shin was alright. Suddenly, Shin starts telling him he wasn't, as the chemical tasted very bad. In other words, Shin had developed the ability to read minds. He would shock everyone at the lab by reading what was on their minds, but all it did was alienate him from them even more. They would start calling him creepy, and would feel sorry for him in their minds, and of course, Shin would know about all of it. Seeing this, Asakura apologizes to Shin for getting him mixed up in his stupid research. Shin doesn't like him calling his work stupid and gets upset at him. Not long after that, Shin had left the lab forever. Asakura worries he won't be able to face Shin now, but Lu reassures him he's much better now while working for Sakamoto. She then recites the Sakamoto family rule number 11. If you fight, make peace the same day. In his case, since more than a day had passed, she recommends getting him some sweets too. Asakura pours some acidic liquid into the liquid, breaking it. A guard comes rushing upon hearing the sound of the door creaking open and gets ambushed by Lu. They then start Operation Escape. On the other hand, Horiguchi continues to manipulate Shin and Sakamoto's nervous systems, while also powering himself up by making his arm and leg super powerful. Horiguchi then injects Shin with a barrage of needles, paralyzing him. He then mocks Shin's psychic abilities, calling them useless and wondering why his boss was so interested in them. Hearing him disrespect the powers Asakura had worked so hard on made Shin mad. But Sakamoto casually calmed him down by grabbing him and telling Horiguchi he'll prove to him how Shin's powers weren't useless. Horiguchi injects himself with all the injections he had been carrying around on his shoulders, making himself insanely buff all of a sudden. Sakamoto comes up with a crazy plan to beat him, which even Shin finds crazy. The next moment, Shin walks up to Horiguchi and turns around, facing Sakamoto. Horiguchi takes this as a taunt and attacks, but gets pulverized by Sakamoto's straight right. Sakamoto then unloads a fury of combos onto him whilst aiming for Shin, and Shin is able to dodge them all thanks to his mind-reading abilities. The combined efforts of the two bring Horiguchi down in no time, freeing everyone there from his tyranny. Shin gets stoked for being able to dodge all of the assassin Sakamoto's attacks, though Sakamoto was kind of fat too now. Sakamoto kills Shin in his mind for that last part, and the two head to where Lu was. On their way, Shin asks about what the big deal with the order was. Sakamoto tells Shin that one member could kill 10 of him in 6 seconds, and that he should pretend to be if he ever encounters one. Suddenly, a trap door opens up beneath Sakamoto and Shin, but Sakamoto kicks Shin forward, saving him. Kashima, the reindeer mask-wearing assassin, accompanied by his fellow leaders Onigahara and Takamido, arrives at the basement, where Shishiba and Asaragi had already laid waste to several of their subordinates. Shishiba asks him if Slur was here, but Kashima feigns ignorance. Onigahara and Takamido immediately surrounded Shishiba to kill him, but got cut up and decapitated by Asaragi the next second. Showing immense grief over the deaths of his fallen comrades, Kashima unties the stitches on his arm to reveal blades, which he then uses and actually slashes Shishiba, telling him he only did what his boss desired of him, which justified his killings, deepening Shishiba's suspicion of him being connected to Slurs. Shishiba twists Kashima's head 180 degrees, killing him instantly. Or so he thought as he gets up again. Kashima reveals his skeleton was man-made, giving him extreme durability when suddenly Sakamoto drops on him. Shishiba and Sakamoto greet each other while Osaragi thinks Sakamoto looks just like a teddy bear. Hearing Sakamoto's name, Kashima gets up, saying he was the only one who had injured his boss in the past, as he reveals weapons on his other arm and even in his mouth. Meanwhile, Shin gets his hands full with Siba again. Shishiba and Asaragi leave Sakamoto to look for Slur. Asaragi worries about Sakamoto's chances, but Shishiba tells her that from what he knew of Sakamoto, he just can't imagine him dying. Not wanting to work a second overtime, Siba thinks about ending things quickly as he stabs Shin in the gut. Shin falls forward, swiping his bloody hand on Siba, and hope seems lost. However, Shin ends up having the last laugh, as now Siba was no longer completely invisible, enabling Mishimo to stuff him with a few of his sniper bullets.